The National Archives building stands imposing against the gray November sky, its neoclassical columns weathered by decades of Washington winters. Inside, the temperature-controlled archives preserve millions of documents and photographs that chronicle America's complex history. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a 42-year-old historian specializing in 19th-century American photography, walks through the climate-controlled vault with practiced efficiency, her footsteps echoing softly against the concrete floor. Sarah has spent 15 years working with Civil War-era materials, but today she's examining a collection that predates the war by 2 years. The 1859 photographic survey commissioned by Southern Plantation Documentation Projects represents one of the earliest systematic attempts to catalog plantation life. These images, stored in acid-free containers and rarely viewed, contain details that contemporary viewers never noticed. Most people don't realize what we can learn from old photographs when we apply modern technology, Sarah explains to her research assistant, Marcus Chen, a graduate student from Georgetown University. The human eye in 1859 saw one thing. Digital enhancement in 2024 reveals entirely different layers of information. Marcus carefully removes photograph number SA 1859-0347 from its protective sleeve. The daguerreotype, measuring 8 by 10 inches, shows what appears to be a standard plantation scene from Fairfax County, Virginia. In the foreground stands a woman, her image captured with the stark clarity that only daguerreotypes could achieve. The photographer's notes, written in faded ink on the reverse side, identify her simply as domestic servant, Fairfax Estate. But it's what's behind her that will change everything. Sarah positions the photograph under the high-resolution scanner, a piece of equipment worth more than most people's cars. The machine hums to life, its sensors capable of capturing details invisible to the naked eye. As the digital file appears on her computer screen, she begins the process that has become second nature, systematic examination of every quadrant, every shadow, every line. Start with the obvious, then work your way into the background, she tells Marcus, who takes notes on his tablet. Clothing, posture, facial features, these tell us about the subject. But environmental details tell us about the world they inhabited. The woman in the photograph appears to be in her 30s, wearing a simple dark dress typical of the period. Her expression is neutral, almost blank, a common feature in daguerreotypes where subjects needed to remain perfectly still for extended exposures. The photographer positioned her in front of what appears to be a large oak tree, its massive trunk dominating the right side of the frame. Sarah zooms in on the woman's face first, noting the high resolution of this particular daguerreotype. Whoever took this photograph was skilled, she observes. The focus is sharp, the exposure well calculated. This wasn't amateur work. She moves methodically across the image, the ground beneath the woman's feet, packed dirt with sparse grass, the edge of a building visible in the far left corner, likely slave quarters based on the architectural style. The oak tree itself, probably over 100 years old even in 1859. Then Sarah stops. Her hand freezes on the mouse. She leans closer to the screen, her eyes narrowing. Marcus notices the change in her demeanor immediately. "What is it?" he asks, moving around the desk to see what she's seeing. Sarah points to a section of the oak tree's trunk, approximately 5 feet from the ground. "Look at this area here. See these marks?" Marcus squints at the screen. At first, he sees only the natural texture of bark, the play of light and shadow across the rough surface. But as Sarah adjusts the contrast and brightness, something emerges from the grain of the wood, deliberate marks, carved into the trunk with what must have been considerable effort. "Are those letters?" Marcus asks, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. "Not just letters," Sarah says, her professional composure cracking with excitement. "Words, names, dates." She grabs her phone and starts taking photographs of the screen. "Marcus, we need to document this immediately. And we need to call Dr. Patterson at Howard University. This changes everything." 3 days later, the photograph has become the center of an intensive research effort. Dr. James Patterson, an expert in African American history from Howard University, joins Sarah and Marcus in Georgetown's Digital Humanities Lab. The room buzzes with the white noise of computer equipment, large monitors displaying various enhanced versions of the photograph. I've seen plantation photographs from this era that contained hidden messages, but never anything quite like this, James says, adjusting his reading glasses as he examines the enhanced images. At 58, he spent his entire career uncovering hidden narratives in American history. The question is, can we read what's written and can we verify it? Sarah has prepared multiple digital enhancements, each one revealing different aspects of the carved text. I've applied 6 different filtering techniques. The best results come from this one, a combination of contrast enhancement and edge detection. On the screen, the tree trunk now reveals its secret with startling clarity. Carved into the bark are multiple lines of text, each approximately 2 inches tall, cut deep enough to survive decades of weathering. The carver used what must have been a knife or similar tool, working with deliberate precision to ensure the message would last. James begins reading aloud, slowly, reverently, Moses Freeman. Born Maryland 1831. Sold away from mother 1839. Brought to Virginia 1840. The room falls silent. Marcus swallows hard, feeling the weight of what they're witnessing. Sarah points to another section, slightly lower on the trunk. There's more. At least 3 other names, maybe 4. And here, she highlights another area. These look like numbers. Could be dates, could be something else. James pulls out his laptop and begins creating a transcription document. We need to capture every word, every mark. This isn't just vandalism or random scratching. This is documentation. Someone wanted to leave a record. But why? Marcus asks. Why carve it into a tree on a plantation where it could be discovered? Sarah considers this. Maybe that's exactly why. Maybe they wanted it to be permanent, to outlast them. Trees live for centuries. Paper burns, memories fade, but oak trees remember. James nods slowly. And photographers in 1859 weren't looking at tree trunks. They were focused on their subjects, on composition, on light. This message has been hiding in plain sight for 165 years, waiting for someone to notice. Sarah returns to the archives with a new mission, finding every photograph from the 1859 Fairfax County Survey. If one photograph contains hidden inscriptions, others might as well. She submits a formal research request, and within hours, 12 additional daguerreotypes from the same collection arrive at her examination station. The process is painstaking. Each photograph requires scanning, enhancement, and careful analysis. Marcus works alongside her, taking shifts so they can maintain momentum. By the 3rd day, they found 2 more photographs with inscriptions, one on a barn door, partially obscured by shadows, and another on a fence post. They're different handwriting, Marcus observes, comparing the carved letters. Or different carving styles, at least. This isn't one person's project. Multiple people were leaving these messages. Sarah photographs each discovery with meticulous documentation. We're looking at an underground documentation system. People who couldn't write letters, couldn't keep journals, couldn't leave official records. They found another way. She thinks about the woman in the original photograph, standing in front of that oak tree. Did she know about the inscription behind her? Did she position herself there deliberately, knowing the photographer would capture it? Or was it pure coincidence, a random alignment that preserved a message never meant for 1859 eyes, but for the future? We need to find out who she was, Sarah says finally. And we need to find out what happened to Moses Freeman. Dr. James Patterson's office at Howard University resembles an archaeological dig site, with documents, books, and file folders covering every available surface. But there's organization within the chaos. Decades of research have taught him to maintain systems that make sense to him, even if they baffle visitors. He spreads out printouts of the enhanced photograph across his desk, each one showing different aspects of the tree trunk inscriptions. His research assistant, Dr. Aisha Williams, a postdoctoral fellow specializing in slavery records, studies the images with intense concentration. Moses Freeman, born Maryland 1831, Aisha reads aloud. That gives us a starting point. Maryland kept relatively good records, especially in the tobacco-growing counties. James opens his laptop to the Maryland State Archives database, one of many digital repositories he's helped develop over the years. The problem is that enslaved people rarely appear in records under their full names. We might find Moses in an estate inventory or Freeman Moses in a sale document, but tracing individuals requires cross-referencing multiple sources. Aisha pulls up another database on her tablet. What about the Fairfax County records? If he was brought to Virginia in 1840, there should be property records, tax documents, maybe court records if there were any disputes. Good thinking, James says, already navigating to the Virginia Historical Society's online collections. But we need to be systematic. Let's build a timeline first, then fill in the gaps. They create a shared document, starting with what they know for certain: 1831, Moses Freeman born in Maryland 1839, separated from his mother, age 8, 1840, brought to Virginia 1859, name carved into oak tree on Fairfax County plantation, 18 years in Virginia, Aisha calculates. That's enough time to establish connections, maybe start a family. The question is, did he carve this inscription, or did someone else do it for him? James zooms in on the photograph, studying the carving technique. The letters are consistent in size and depth. Whoever did this had time and privacy. This wasn't rushed work. Sarah and Marcus have expanded their investigation, bringing in Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a forensic document examiner from the Library of Congress. Elena specializes in analyzing historical inscriptions, using techniques developed for authenticating ancient manuscripts. What you're looking at is called arbor-glyphic documentation, Elena explains, setting up her equipment around the high-resolution monitor. People have been carving messages into trees for thousands of years. The challenge is dating the inscriptions and determining if they're contemporary with the photograph. She pulls up a reference guide showing bark healing patterns. Oak trees form new growth layers annually. When someone carves into bark, the tree begins healing the wound immediately. Over decades, the carved area changes texture and depth. By analyzing these patterns, we can estimate when the carving was made. Marcus leans forward, fascinated. So you can tell if this was carved in 1859 or earlier? Within a range, Elena cautions. I can say if it's consistent with mid-19th century carving, or if it's obviously modern. But the photograph itself provides our best timestamp. We know the inscription existed by 1859 because it's visible in the image. She begins her analysis, using software that measures depth variations in the enhanced photograph. The shadows in the carved letters suggest depth of approximately 1/4 inch. The bark texture around the letters shows typical healing patterns. No signs of modern tools. Everything is consistent with a simple blade, probably a pocket knife. Sarah watches the analysis unfold. Can you make out any letters that weren't visible in our initial enhancement? Elena adjusts various filters, switching between infrared simulation and edge detection algorithms. Slowly, more details emerge. There's additional text here, below the main inscription. It's partially obscured, maybe by natural bark growth, but I can make out "remember" or "remembered," and possibly a date. She works for another 20 minutes, trying different enhancement techniques. Finally, a clearer image emerges, remembered by all who knew him. The room falls silent again. Marcus feels a chill despite the lab's warm temperature. It's a memorial, Sarah says softly. Someone carved this after Moses Freeman was gone. This isn't self-documentation, it's a eulogy. James and Aisha travel to Annapolis to search physical records that haven't been digitized. The Maryland State Archives building, a modern structure housing centuries of documents, becomes their workplace for the next week. They start with estate records from 1839, the year Moses Freeman was reportedly separated from his mother. Maryland law required detailed inventories when enslaved people were sold, especially in cases of estate settlements or debt collections. Look for phrases like woman and child or family separation, James instructs, scanning page after page of handwritten documents. Sellers sometimes noted family relationships to justify prices. Young children with mothers were worth more than those sold separately. Aisha finds it in an estate settlement from Baltimore County, dated March 1839. The document lists one Negro woman named Judith, age approximately 28, and her son Moses, age 8, sold separately to settle debts of deceased estate owner Thomas Ridgway. Here, she says, her voice tight with controlled emotion. Judith and Moses. Sold to different buyers to maximize return for creditors. James photographs the document with his phone, capturing every detail. Who are the buyers? Aisha traces her finger down the page. The woman Judith to a plantation owner in southern Maryland, continuing tobacco work. The boy Moses to... She pauses, checking the faded handwriting, to a trader named William Cassidy, destination listed as Virginia. Virginia, James repeats. That matches the inscription. Moses Freeman was sold to a trader who brought him to Virginia in 1840, exactly as carved into that tree. They spend the next 3 days following paper trails through Maryland and Virginia records. William Cassidy's trading records show he transported 18 enslaved people to Virginia in 1840, all sold to various plantations in northern Virginia. One entry, dated May 1840, records, boy Moses, age 9, sold to Fairfax Estate, price $350. The Fairfax Estate. The same location where the photograph was taken 19 years later. The research team convenes via video conference. Sarah and Marcus in Georgetown, James and Aisha in Annapolis, Elena Rodriguez at the Library of Congress. They share their findings, building a composite picture of Moses Freeman's life. We can trace him from Maryland to Virginia, James summarizes, sharing his screen showing a timeline. Born 1831, sold away from his mother at age 8, brought to the Fairfax estate in 1840. But then we lose him. No records after that initial sale. Sarah brings up the photograph on her screen. Except for this. Someone carved his name, his story, onto that oak tree. Someone wanted him remembered. The question is why, Aisha says. What happened that made someone create a memorial? And who was the woman in the photograph? Was she connected to Moses Freeman? Elena shares her latest findings. I've finished analyzing all 12 photographs from the 1859 survey. 3 contain inscriptions. The oak tree has Moses Freeman's information. The barn door has another name, Sarah Jones, taken 1857, and the fence post has what appears to be a list of names, maybe 15 or 20, though many are illegible. They're creating a record, Marcus says, understanding dawning. The people on this plantation were documenting their own history, using surfaces that would outlast them. Trees, buildings, structures that would be photographed, that would enter the historical record whether anyone wanted them to or not. James nods slowly. It's brilliant, really. They couldn't keep papers, couldn't write letters that would be preserved. But they could carve permanent records into the physical landscape, hoping someone eventually would notice. Sarah makes a decision. We need to find that tree. If it still exists, if it survived the Civil War and everything that came after, there might be more inscriptions. More names, more stories. After 165 years. Marcus asks skeptically. Oak trees can live for 300 years, Sarah replies. It's possible. And even if the tree is gone, we might find the location, find property records, find descendants who know the stories. She pauses, looking at each face on the screen. We owe it to them. To Moses Freeman, to Sarah Jones, to all those names on that fence post. We owe them remembrance. The drive from Washington, D.C. to Fairfax County takes less than an hour, but it feels like traveling backward through time. The research team, Sarah, Marcus, James, and Aisha, follows old property maps and historical surveys, trying to pinpoint the exact location where the 1859 photograph was taken. Modern Fairfax County is a suburb, dense with housing developments and shopping centers. But pockets of the original landscape remain, preserved by conservation efforts or simply forgotten in the rush of development. They park at a historical marker indicating the former boundaries of the Fairfax estate. A local historian, Robert Chin, meets them there. At 65, Robert has spent 40 years researching Fairfax County history, and he's familiar with the 1859 photographic survey. The estate covered 2,000 acres, Robert explains, unfolding a map that compares 1859 property lines with current roads. Most of it was developed in the 1960s and 70s, but about 200 acres became part of the county park system. If your oak tree survived, it would be somewhere in that preserved area. They walk into the park, following Robert's guidance based on landscape features visible in the photograph. Sarah carries a tablet showing the original daguerreotype, comparing background elements to the current terrain. The photograph shows rolling hills in the background, Marcus observes, and what looks like a stream or creek to the left. Are there any creeks running through this area? Robert nods. Difficult run. It's been here for thousands of years. The Fairfax estate used it as a natural boundary. He leads them toward a wooded area where the sound of running water becomes audible. They emerge into a clearing, and Sarah stops abruptly. This might be it, she says, her voice trembling slightly with excitement. Look at the slope of the land, the position of the creek. It matches the photograph. In the center of the clearing stands an enormous oak tree, its trunk easily 6 feet in diameter, its branches spreading like a natural cathedral. The tree is old, obviously more than a century old, possibly much more. James approaches slowly, almost reverently. He places his hand on the rough bark, feeling the texture of living history beneath his fingers. If this is the same tree, Aisha pulls out a measuring tape and begins documenting the tree's dimensions, following protocols for potential historical landmarks. Marcus photographs from multiple angles, comparing the tree's structure with the background details in the 1859 image. Sarah circles the trunk, searching for any sign of the inscriptions they've studied so intensely. The bark is weathered, scarred by decades of wind and rain, marked by the passage of seasons. She runs her fingers over the surface, feeling for anything that might be carved letters. Then she finds it on the side of the trunk facing southeast, approximately 5 feet from the ground, exactly where the photograph showed the inscriptions. The bark's texture changes. The surface is rougher, with ridge patterns that don't match the surrounding wood. And there, barely visible beneath layers of bark growth, are the faint traces of carved letters. James, Sarah calls, her voice cracking. Bring the enhancement images. James hurries over with his tablet, pulling up the digitally enhanced photograph. They hold it against the tree trunk, comparing the pattern of letters in the image with the faint marks on the actual bark that it matches. This is it, James says, his professional demeanor giving way to raw emotion. This is the same tree. Moses Freeman's memorial has been standing right here for 165 years. Transition Fairfax County Historical Society. Later that day, Robert Chin brings the team to the Fairfax County Historical Society, housed in a restored 18th century building that serves as both museum and research center. The Society's director, Dr. Patricia Monroe, has agreed to help them access records related to the Fairfax estate. Patricia, a woman in her 50s with gray-streaked hair and sharp eyes, leads them to the research room where boxes of documents wait. The Fairfax family kept extensive records, she explains, but like most Southern plantation records, there are intentional gaps. Financial transactions were documented meticulously. The human stories behind those transactions, less so. They begin with plantation ledgers from 1840 to 1860. James focuses on entries related to enslaved people, looking for any mention of Moses Freeman or Moses associated with the Fairfax estate. He finds multiple references. Moses appears in annual inventories, valued at increasing amounts as he grew from child to adult. In 1845, age 14, he's listed as field hand, value $600. By 1855, age 24, he's become skilled carpenter, value $1,200. Carpenter, Aisha notes. That's significant. Skilled workers had more autonomy, more opportunity to move around the plantation, more access to tools. Sarah sees the implication immediately. Tools like knives, privacy to work alone, opportunities to carve inscriptions without constant supervision. They continue searching, and Marcus finds a crucial document, an 1858 bill of sale. Moses, carpenter, age 27, sold to Richmond buyer for $1,400, paid in full. The room falls silent as they process this information. He was sold again, James says quietly. After 18 years at the Fairfax estate, after becoming a skilled craftsman, after establishing whatever life he could build, he was sold to someone in Richmond. Aisha checks the date. June 1858. That's a year before the photograph was taken. A year before someone carved his memorial into that oak tree. Patricia pulls up Richmond city records on her computer, searching for any trace of what happened next. Richmond in 1858 was a major urban center, a hub for tobacco processing and trade. Many skilled carpenters worked in the warehouses and docks. She finds an entry in Richmond medical records from September 1858. Moses Freeman, Negro carpenter, age 27, admitted to Richmond Charity Hospital with typhoid fever. Died 3 days later. Body claimed by Fairfax estate representative for burial. The words hang in the air like physical weights. They brought him back, Sarah whispers. Someone from the Fairfax estate brought his body back home. James closes his eyes, taking a moment to breathe. And someone carved his memorial. Someone who knew his story, who wanted it preserved. Someone who stood by that oak tree and cut his name, his birthplace, his losses, into wood that would outlast them all. The team returns to the oak tree as the sun sets, painting the Virginia sky in shades of orange and purple. They've brought equipment to make careful molds of the remaining visible inscriptions, documenting what 165 years of bark growth hasn't completely obscured. Aisha works carefully with dental impression material, capturing the texture of the carved letters. We'll be able to create 3D models from these molds, she explains. Future researchers will have access to exact replicas, even if the tree eventually dies. Marcus sets up lighting to photograph the inscriptions from multiple angles, using the same enhancement techniques that revealed them in the 1859 daguerreotype. On his laptop screen, the letters emerge more clearly. Moses Freeman. Remembered by all who knew him. Sarah stands back, looking at the tree as a whole. I keep thinking about the woman in the photograph. She's standing right in front of this inscription, but we don't know if she knew it was there. We don't know her name, her story. James joins her, both of them watching the sun sink lower. We know she was there, on that day in 1859. We know someone cared enough about Moses Freeman to create a memorial that would appear in a photograph meant to document plantation life. Maybe that was intentional, maybe whoever positioned her knew exactly what would be captured. An act of resistance, Aisha says, carefully packing away her molding materials. Creating a record that would survive in the official documentation, even though the documentarians never intended to preserve those stories. Robert Chen, who has been quietly observing the team's work, speaks up. There's something else you should know. I've been researching the Fairfax estate for years, and I found references to a small cemetery on the property, in burial ground for enslaved people. It's about half a mile from here. He pauses, letting the implication sink in. If they brought Moses Freeman's body back from Richmond, if someone cared enough to memorialize him on this tree, there's a good chance he's buried there. And if we can find that cemetery, we might find answers to other questions, about who carved these inscriptions, about who else is remembered. The sun disappears below the horizon, leaving the oak tree silhouetted against the darkening sky. Sarah makes a decision that will shape the next phase of their research. We find that cemetery, she says. We document every name, every marker, every trace of the people who lived and died here. And we tell their stories, the ones they tried so hard to preserve for us. The search for the cemetery brings in a new team member, Dr. Michael Torres, an archaeologist from the University of Virginia who specializes in historical burial ground identification. His equipment, ground-penetrating radar mounted on a cart that looks like a modified lawn mower, can detect disturbances in soil that might indicate graves. Historical records mention a cemetery, but they don't provide exact locations, Michael explains, slowly pushing the radar equipment across a wooded hillside about half a mile from the oak tree. We're looking for patterns, regular spacing, rectangular anomalies, changes in soil density consistent with burial sites. Sarah, Marcus, James, and Aisha watch the radar readings appear on Michael's laptop screen in real time. For hours, The data shows only natural soil variations and tree roots. Then, as they move into a slight depression surrounded by old-growth trees, the patterns change. "Stop," Michael says, his eyes fixed on the screen. "Look at this. Regular spacing, consistent depths, approximately 60 distinct anomalies." He looks up at the team, his expression grave. "This is it. This is your cemetery." Over the next week, they conduct a careful surface survey, documenting everything without disturbing the ground. Virginia law protects historical burial sites, and any excavation would require extensive permissions. But even without digging, they find evidence: fragments of stone markers, barely visible beneath decades of leaf litter, and depressions in the ground that suggest collapsed wooden grave markers. James photographs one of the stone fragments, brushing away soil to reveal carved letters. "Man 18. The rest is broken away, lost to time." But it's enough to confirm that people cared about marking these graves, about creating lasting memorials. They tried to remember, Aisha says, her voice thick with emotion. Even when they knew the world was trying to forget them, they carved names, they marked graves, they left traces. The research team has decided to share their findings publicly, organizing a presentation at Howard University that will be live-streamed for wider access. The auditorium fills with historians, genealogists, community members, and descendants of people enslaved in Fairfax County. Sarah begins the presentation, the 1859 daguerreotype projected large on the screen behind her. What appears to be an ordinary photograph from before the Civil War turned out to be an extraordinary document of human resilience and determination. Today, we're sharing what we've learned and what these findings mean for understanding history. She walks through their discovery process: the initial scanning, the enhanced imaging, the revelation of carved inscriptions on the oak tree. The audience watches in rapt silence as the digital enhancements reveal Moses Freeman's memorial. James takes over, presenting their archival research. "We were able to trace Moses Freeman's life through official records, the documents that weren't meant to honor him, but to track him as property." Born in Maryland in 1831, sold away from his mother at age 8, brought to Virginia where he spent 18 years developing skills as a carpenter, then sold again to Richmond where he died of typhoid fever at age 27. He pauses, letting the audience absorb the stark reality of that truncated life. But then there's the other record, the one created by people who knew him, who wanted him remembered not as property but as a person. The inscription on the oak tree fills in what official documents never captured: that he was loved, that his loss was mourned, that his life mattered to the community that survived him. Aisha presents their findings about the cemetery and the other inscriptions discovered in the photograph survey. "We identified at least 15 names across 3 different photographs, all carved into permanent surfaces between 1855 and 1859. This represents a systematic effort to create alternative documentation, a historical record made by people who understood that official history would try to erase them." She shows examples of each inscription, explaining the painstaking enhancement process that made them visible. Each name represents a life, a story, a loss that someone wanted preserved. Marcus discusses their work with the oak tree itself, showing photographs of the tree today and explaining the molding and preservation process. This tree has stood as a living memorial for 165 years. It witnessed enslavement, the Civil War, Reconstruction, Jim Crow, the Civil Rights Movement, and everything that came after. And it's still there, still holding these carved memories in its wood. During the question and answer period, an elderly woman in the front row raises her hand. She's in her 80s, dressed carefully in a blue suit, her white hair styled elegantly. When the microphone reaches her, her voice is strong and clear. "My name is Dorothy Freeman Washington," she says. "My great-great-grandfather was named Moses Freeman. My grandmother told stories about him, how he was a skilled carpenter, how he died young, how the family never forgot him even though records said he died in Richmond with no kin." She pauses, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I always wondered if her stories were true or if they were just family mythology. Thank you for proving she was right to remember." The auditorium erupts in applause. Sarah feels her own tears forming as she watches this woman, this living connection to Moses Freeman, stand to receive acknowledgement from the crowd. James invites Dorothy to join them on stage, and for the next 20 minutes, she shares her family's oral history, stories passed down through generations about Moses's skill with wood, his kindness to children, the devastation when he was sold to Richmond, the determination of those who remained to keep his memory alive. My grandmother said someone carved his story into a tree on the old plantation, Dorothy says. She said it was important because trees remember longer than people do. But I never knew if it was literal or metaphorical. Now I know it was both. Other audience members come forward with similar stories, sharing family histories that connect to the Fairfax estate and the cemetery the team discovered. A network of descendants emerges, people whose ancestors were the ones who carved those inscriptions, who maintain those memories across generations. In the weeks following the presentation, Sarah and her team work with Fairfax County officials, historical preservation organizations, and descendant communities to develop protection plans for the oak tree and the cemetery. The oak tree receives official landmark status, with protective fencing installed to prevent damage while still allowing public access. Interpretive signs explain the inscriptions and their historical significance. The cemetery site becomes protected land, with plans for a memorial that will honor all those buried there, known and unknown. Patricia Monroe from the Fairfax County Historical Society leads a fundraising effort to create a comprehensive memorial project. We're commissioning a sculptor to create a permanent installation at the cemetery site, she explains at a planning meeting. It will include all the names we've identified from the inscriptions, plus a place for descendants to add names from their own family histories. Dorothy Freeman Washington becomes a key collaborator, working with the team to ensure descendant communities guide the memorial's design and interpretation. Our ancestors left these messages for us, she says. The least we can do is honor their intentions by telling their stories accurately and with dignity. On a bright Saturday in June, over 300 people gather around the oak tree for a dedication ceremony. The crowd includes historians, descendants, local officials, and community members who followed the story since its revelation. Sarah stands before the assembled group, the oak tree towering behind her. 6 months ago, this tree was just part of the landscape. Now we understand it as what it truly is, a testament to human resilience, a memorial created by people determined to be remembered despite every effort to erase them. She gestures to the tree trunk, where clear protective panels now cover the inscription site while allowing visitors to see the carved letters. Moses Freeman, born 1831 in Maryland, sold away from his mother at age 8, brought to Virginia where he built a life despite everything working against him, died too young at 27 in Richmond. His name stands here as a reminder that every person in that era of enslavement was an individual with their own story, their own losses, their own hopes. James speaks next, his voice carrying across the crowd. Historical archives tell us about property transactions, crop yields, economic systems. But these inscriptions tell us about people, about love and loss, about memory and resistance, about the determination to create records when official systems refuse to acknowledge their humanity. Dorothy Freeman Washington, accompanied by 15 family members spanning 4 generations, unveils a bronze plaque that will be mounted near the oak tree. The plaque includes Moses Freeman's full story as they've been able to reconstruct it, along with the names of the other people memorialized in the 1859 photographs. My great-great-grandfather has been gone for 167 years, Dorothy says, her hand resting on the oak tree's bark. But because someone carved his story into this tree, because that story appeared in a photograph, because researchers cared enough to look closely, he's not forgotten. None of them are forgotten. The ceremony concludes with a moment of silence, the crowd standing quietly beneath the oak tree's spreading branches. Then, gradually, people begin to talk, sharing stories, making connections, taking photographs, promising to return. Sarah sits in her office, surrounded by the familiar papers and photographs of ongoing research. The Moses Freeman Project led to broader initiatives, a comprehensive survey of 19th century photographs for hidden inscriptions, a database of cemetery locations in Virginia, partnerships with descendant communities to document oral histories. Marcus, now working on his doctoral dissertation about alternative historical documentation, stops by to show Sarah his latest findings. "I've been analyzing photographs from 7 other states," he says excitedly. "We're finding inscriptions everywhere, barns, fence posts, even carved into the foundations of buildings. It's like an entire hidden archive was waiting to be discovered." Sarah smiles, feeling the weight of responsibility that comes with this work. Every inscription is someone's ancestor, someone's story that deserves to be told. "We can't stop now." Through her office window, she can see Georgetown's campus, students moving between classes, living their lives in the present. But Sarah's work keeps her connected to the past, not the sanitized, official past of traditional archives, but the raw, human past of people who insisted on being remembered despite every obstacle. Her phone rings. It's James, calling with news about another photograph from the 1859 survey, this one showing what appears to be carved initials on a cabin wall. "We need to run enhancement analysis," he says. "Want to collaborate?" Sarah pulls up her calendar, already rearranging her schedule. "Send me the files. Let's see whose story we can help tell next." As she hangs up and begins preparing for this new investigation, Sarah glances at a framed print on her wall, the original 1859 daguerreotype of the woman standing in front of the oak tree, the inscription barely visible behind her. They still don't know her name, still don't know her full story. But they know she was there, witness to an act of remembrance that transcended time, and that, Sarah thinks, is where history truly lives, not in the grand official narratives, but in these small acts of resistance, these determined efforts to say, "I was here, we were here, remember us." Every time someone stops at the oak tree, every time someone reads Moses Freeman's inscription, every time a descendant discovers their ancestor's name, those acts of remembrance fulfill the promise carved into that bark 166 years ago. History is not just what's written in official documents. History is also what's carved into oak trees by people who understood that some truths need to outlast those who try to silence them.